Hello friends, my name's Emile and welcome back to some more Reach the Peak, the show where you guys recommend the cars and then I take them up our hill climb course to see which one can come out on top. Today we have 5 vehicles here for you as usual, and we're going to be kicking things off with a mad Swedish hypercar. The best way to start anything really. It is the 2011 Koenigsegg Agera. It has 946 horsepower, 811 foot-pound of torque, it weighs 3,164 pounds, and it is an S2 class car, 946 MPI when equipped with the snow tyres. It is the most powerful vehicle here today, the torquiest vehicle here today, and the highest in PI. So, the Koenigsegg Agera then, this is honestly in my top 5 favourite cars of all time. I absolutely love the Agera, it's my favourite hypercar ever. It's just a crazy contraption. It looks great, it has a very silly amount of power, it has very crazy engineering going on, it's Swedish, and it comes in a really nice blue colour. What more could you ask for? Now, of course, being mid-engine rear drive and completely crazy, you'd expect this thing to be pretty horrible up here, especially with 900 horsepower trying to push their way through those rear wheels. But actually, if you're careful with it, the Agera is pretty darn good. This is actually possibly one of the best rear-wheel drive, if not the best rear-wheel drive hypercars I've actually driven up here. You know, compared to like the McLaren P1 and so on, this is it's just better. I think the suspension might be a little bit softer than it is on the P1, but other than that, you know, it's a lot more controllable. It knows what it's doing with its power, which is nice, and it doesn't get bogged down or anything. Of course, it's stupidly fast as far as like actual speed goes. This thing probably rivals the Veyron on speeds it was getting through certain sections here. It is a crazy contraption, as it turns out. It's a pretty decent handling one as well. And the best bit about it, you can even get a roof box on this car, which we'll explore later. So, if you want a car for a nice, if you want a hypercar for a nice getaway in the Alps for a couple of days, then yeah, the Agera might be it, because on snow, pretty good, as it turns out. Definitely one of the better rear-wheel drive hypercars, as I said. Yeah, really very solid vehicle, which I was not expecting to say at the start of this, but there you go. Anyways, next up we move from a mad Swedish car to a mad American car. This is a 2013 Dodge Viper GTS. It has 640 horsepower, 600 foot-pound of torque, weighs 3,296 pounds. It is an S1 class car, 882 MPI when equipped with the snow tyres. The Viper GTS, again, speaking of cars in my all-time top 5 cars, the Viper GTS from 2013 is right up there as well. I love this model of the Viper. It's my favourite in terms of looks and technology and just overall usability. You know, these Vipers are really very good cars, and I've driven these on various other games, and as it turns out, the 2013 Vipers are usually really very good handling cars. And of course, that's with the ACR here in Horizon 3 now. That is improved tenfold, because the ACR is a truly incredible handling machine on tarmac. But we're not here to talk about the ACR, we're here to talk about the GTS, the standard one. This is pretty decent. For, you know, 640 horsepower, again, this is rear-wheel drive, like the Agera was. And honestly, this handles its power better than most cars with 300 horsepower going through the rear wheels. It really is a very good handling car. And it's, yeah, you can full throttle this through some sections, which again, you know, in some 300 horsepower sports coupes you can't get away with that, but the, you know, super muscle car Viper handles it pretty well. It does handle really very well. As far as sort of these super muscle cars go, I have reasons to suspect, as far as the modern one goes, the Viper GTS is going to be one of the better, just because, you know, unlike cars like the ACR Viper and the C7 Corvette, you know, this thing doesn't have hard track-ready suspension. It's just got sort of normal road-going springs, and as we've discussed before, you know, the harder suspension, genuinely the cars go slower. But yeah, the Viper GTS, really very solid car, and that, again, like with the Agera being very good, it makes me very happy that the Viper is good, because I like the Viper a lot. In fact, you know, in terms of just in general, every single car in today's episode I like, which is always a good thing, I guess. Speaking of, well, liking stuff, we move on to the Ford Escort, the 1992 Ford Escort Horizon Edition. We've had the original version of the car up, now it's time to look at the Horizon Edition. 300 horsepower, 352 foot-pound of torque, 2,806 pounds of weight. This is an A-Class car, 800 in PI because the Horizon Edition comes with the snow tyres by default. It's the lightest vehicle here today, surprisingly enough. So, the Escort RS Cosworth Horizon Edition. Essentially, the major changes to this car with the Horizon Edition upgrade is it essentially gets the rally upgrades, and it also receives the turbo rally engine. The original version runs 212 horsepower, this one runs 300 thanks to the turbo rally, and I believe this is one of the only cars we've ever had up with the turbo rally engine so far. In case you're curious, the turbo rally engine is basically the Ford Fiesta WRC car engine, and it's a pretty solid engine. You know, in previous games it wasn't very good, but they've sort of sorted out the torque curve in more recent games, so it is a better engine for it. Anyways, the Escort is, well, there's no better way to say it, it's really rather excellent to drive. It is super Impreza levels of grip, with a little bit more speed, because it doesn't weigh as much as them. Granted, as far as sort of top-end speed goes, the Escort does miss out on that a little bit. You know, this, if it had 400 horsepower, which would be entirely possible if they got rid of some of the rally upgrades in this car, this would be stupidly quick up here. You know, it'd be, the Subaru Brat Horizon Edition is one of the fastest cars we've had up here, you know, A-Class 800, just because that thing had mental speed and decent enough handling. The Escort isn't that, because it hasn't got the mental speed, but it is a superb handling vehicle. You know, as far as Horizon Editions go, this is probably one of my favourite I've ever driven in terms of handling. Really is a very, very solid car. I can only really think of one complaint, and that's maybe the tyre on the roof does block a little bit of your visibility. Admittedly, you can take that off if you wanted to, but I like to leave the Horizon Editions exactly as they are because, well, that's sort of the whole point of using these vehicles. But yeah, really very, very solid vehicle. I really like driving the Escort, and I'll probably use it a bit more as sort of an actual rally car for Blizzard Mountain. Next up, we have the 1987 Nissan Skyline R31. Of course, episode 31 needed the R31 because it's one of my favourite Skylines. 206 horsepower, 181 foot-pound of torque, 2,965 pounds of weight. It is an A-Class car, 728 in PI, what equipped with the snow tyres. It is the least powerful vehicle here today, the least torquey vehicle here today, and the lowest in PI. The R31 Skyline, as I previously mentioned, probably one of my favourite Skylines, if not my favourite. This and the R33 usually swap places in my head, like the Nismo 400R 4-door thing. I really like that one. But the R31 is a really very, very cool car. I love the way it looks. I loved when this thing came to Horizon 3 for the first time in DLC. It was a truly incredible, incredible thing. Unfortunately, unlike the rest of its sort of Skyline brethren that have gone up here so far, well, have we had the 71? I don't think we have. This is not 4-wheel drive, it's not all-wheel drive, it is a rear-wheel drive. I guess the R33 LM road car was rear-wheel drive as well. But yeah, this thing is rear-wheel drive, and unfortunately, that does cause some issues. It is decent enough, it isn't bad, it's not the worst rear-wheel drive car I've had, but it only has 206 horsepower, and with that, combined with the weight, combined with just like the fact the rear wheels do like to slip, it hasn't got all that much traction, and that does mean this can get bogged down. You know, not bogged down like the Camaro IROC Z or anything like that, but you can just sort of see coming up this hill, it just isn't particularly quick. Really, which is a bit of a shame. You know, handling wise, again, it's okay. It's, if you're looking for sort of a Nissan to take off-roading, you're better off looking at one of the Skylines. Admittedly, comparing this to the R33 road car, I do think this is the better handling of the two, but, oh sorry, the R33 LM, I should say. I keep saying R33 road car, and that's technically the normal version, but yeah, you know what I mean by that. The R31 just isn't a particularly good vehicle. Of course, you can all-wheel drive swap this thing, you can put a wide body on it and get some bigger tyres, and I'm sure this thing makes an absolutely excellent rally car if you do that, but from standard, unfortunately not quite. And finally today we move on to the big black GM. This is the 1987 Buick Regal GNX, 300 horsepower, 380 foot-pound of torque, 3,545 pounds of weight. This is an A-Class car, 733 in PI. It is the heaviest vehicle here today. by quite a long way actually. I didn't realise this thing actually weighed that much more than a Viper, but then again I guess the Buick Regal was a luxury car essentially, and GNX was of course the performance package for this vehicle. The GNX has a pretty interesting history. I do recommend RCR's review of the Buick Regal Grand National if you want to find out more about this car, but it's a really cool car. I do like the Buick Regal from this generation an awful lot actually. I don't know what it is about some of these sort of bigger, boatier American cars from like the 80s and 90s. I like them, you know. I like this, I like the Chevrolet Caprice, I like the Ford Crown Vic. I don't know why, I just do. And yeah, the Regal is a really very cool car, of course, turbocharged. One of the first ever turbocharged American cars, and one of the very first that actually added some legitimacy to turbocharging in America. As far as it is to drive, it's alright. It is boaty on the suspension, you know, 1987, it is a luxury car from America. You know, it's a GM luxury car from America. It has sort of wafty suspension, essentially. So yeah, it is a little bit boaty. It's actually surprisingly enough, this thing doesn't bog itself as much as the Skyline did. I'm going to put that down to the fact this has a little bit more power and probably slightly wider tyres on it. Yeah, it doesn't get bogged down as much as the R31, but ultimately, the Regal, it isn't the best choice for climbing up a mountain. You know, between this and the R31 is, in my opinion, the slightly more well-rounded car. Admittedly, this is quicker in a straight line by far, and, you know, the softer suspension does help it, but, yeah, it just isn't quite as nice, maybe, as the R31 is. But even still, there are much better alternatives to both the R31 and the Regal when it comes to off-roading, like the Corvette C2 that we had in the live special, which did really very well. But yeah, the Regal wasn't too terrible. It handled about as I expected it to. Anyways, moving on to the times, and the Koenigsegg Agera was the fastest car of the day, going into 27th with a 207.728, slightly off a Bentley Bentayga, does beat a Ford Focus RS Horizon Edition and the Ram Runner Horizon Edition, which is pretty good. Viper GTS finds itself in 32nd place with a 208.662, breaks in between a bunch of supercars, so it's slightly slower than a Ford GT, and slightly quicker than an XJ220 and a McLaren 650S. Both good times for those vehicles, and they deserve it because they were good cars. Moving down the board some more, the Escort Horizon Edition is in 38th with a 209.162, wedges itself in the Ferrari complex, which is good. For some reason, 4 Ferraris sort of built themselves around each other, and the Escort has broken into that. It's quicker than 2005 Impreza, which is something, so yeah, that car's really very good. The Regal GNX finds itself in 112th with a 222.575, beats a Donkavort by a thousandth of a second. Quicker than a Lancia 037, HSV GCSR, misses out on a Fiesta ST and an Opel Manta, but overall pretty decent time for the big black GN. And moving down the board once more, the slowest car today was the R31 Skyline, going to 129th, again a thousandth seconds off of a Polaris RZR. It's quicker than an Impala, Jeep Wrangler Rubicon, an RX-7 FC, which I guess is a rival of sorts, slightly slower than a HDT Commodore and a Renault 5 Turbo. Anyways friends, that is it for this episode of Reach Peak. I do hope you've enjoyed. As always, if you have cars you'd like to request for this series, simply leave them down below in the comment section and I will get to them at some point. With that all being said and done friends, thank you all very much for watching. My name has been the Real Emile. Till next time, farewell.